This deep dive takes us to Chhattisgarh, India. Um, and we're going to be uncovering the story of Mukesh Chandrakar. He was a journalist, very fearless journalist who tragically, sadly, wound up dead. His body was found hidden in a septic tank that was sealed with concrete. Crazy, right? We're going to be using reports from the India Express and John Sada to kind of piece together what happened. It really does sound like something out of a movie, but this is real life. It highlights the risks that journalists face, especially when they're challenging powerful people.
Yeah, it's a very real reminder of the dangers that come with exposing the truth, especially in areas where there's a lot of conflict and corruption.
Right. Okay, so let's start with Mukesh Chandrakar himself.
Mm.
This wasn't like some rookie reporter or anything. He had over a decade of experience, right?
That's right.
He was a freelancer for some big names, too.
Yeah.
NDTV, News 18.
Mm.
And he had a YouTube channel called Bastard Junction. That's pretty popular.
Yeah, he had like 159,000 subscribers to that channel.
Wow. That's quite a following. Shows you he knew how to connect with an audience.
Absolutely. And the work he was doing, it wasn't just surface level stuff. Mukesh was known for his really in-depth coverage of Naxal activities in the Bastar region. He was going into these really remote villages, even reporting from Naxal camps themselves. I mean, it takes a certain level of courage to do that, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't just about reporting either. Back in 2021, he actually helped to get some CRPF personnel released. That's members of India's Central Reserve Police Force. They had been captured by Maoist rebels. Seems like he had built up a lot of trust on both sides of this very dangerous, complex conflict.
It's true. And it makes the story all the more tragic, you know. On New Year's Day of this year, 2025, he just vanished. And then 2 days later, his body was found in that septic tank. It was on a property that belonged to a local contractor named Suresh Chandrakar. And to make it even more suspicious, the tank had been sealed up with fresh concrete.
Oh, wow. Chilling. Yeah, it seems obvious that foul play is suspected. But the question is why? What was the motive? Our sources point to one possible answer: corruption. Just weeks before he disappeared, Mukesh published a story. It alleged corruption in a huge road construction project. It was worth like 14.5 million US dollars. And guess who got awarded that project?
Suresh Chandrakar, the same guy who owned the property where they found Mukesh's body. And Mukesh's report specifically pointed out that the work being done was substandard and there were potential financial irregularities. This actually led to a government investigation being opened up. So you can imagine that someone in Suresh's position might have seen Mukesh as a serious threat.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if Mukesh's pursuit of the truth, his relentless pursuit of the truth, made him a target. It's starting to sound like a crime thriller, right?
It does have some of those elements, for sure, but it is important to note that the sources also mentioned there were some disputes between Mukesh and Suresh in the past. Like, apparently, Mukesh had exposed some things about Suresh's lifestyle, said that he used a helicopter to fly his bride to their wedding.
Oh, wow.
In an area with so much poverty, that kind of display of wealth, well, you can imagine how that could fuel some resentment.
Right. So we have a potential motive tied to exposing corruption.
Yeah.
And maybe that was intensified by some personal animosity, right? But there's another piece of the puzzle here that we can't ignore. Mukesh's reporting on the Naxalites. He did a lot of reporting on them.
Yeah, that's right. Now, the sources don't explicitly link his death to the Naxal movement, but it is a possibility that has to be considered. This is a group that is known for being very violent, and Mukesh was spending a lot of time in their territory. He might have crossed a line somewhere. Maybe he disrupted some of their operations through his reporting. It's possible.
So we've got this whole web of potential motives here. The corruption expose, the personal conflicts, and the possible Naxal connection. It's a lot to try to untangle.
It really is. And it's also important to keep in mind that these motives might not be totally separate. They could all be intertwined in ways we don't fully understand yet. But what we do know for sure is that Mukesh Chandrakar was found murdered under very suspicious circumstances. So as we try to piece together what happened to Mukesh Chandrakar, I think it's really important to understand the context of the place he was working in. You know, Bastar isn't just some peaceful countryside. This is a region that's been dealing with a really violent insurgency for decades now.
Right. You're talking about the Naxalites. I know they're like a Maoist-inspired group, but to be honest, I could use a little more background.
Okay, well, think of it this way. The Naxalites say they're fighting for the rights of marginalized communities, the people who have kind of been left behind by India's economic growth. But the thing is, their tactics are often very brutal. They're known for using violence against civilians and against government forces.
So Mukesh was basically reporting from a war zone.
Yeah, essentially, yes. And that adds a whole other level of risk to the work he was doing. Just imagine trying to do your job with that constant threat of violence hanging over you.
I can't even imagine. And then you add in the corruption. It seems like it always thrives in these kinds of places.
You've hit on a really key point there. When you have conflict and instability, you often see powerful individuals, government officials, contractors, even people with links to these insurgent groups. They'll exploit the situation for their own gain, and then they have a very strong interest in silencing anyone who might try to expose them.
Like Mukesh was doing with that road construction project. And we were talking about how his expose pointed the finger at Suresh Chandrakar, the man on whose property they actually found Mukesh's body.
Right, and it's important to remember that this wasn't an isolated incident either. Mukesh had a history of reporting on corruption. He was always trying to hold those in power accountable. He'd even gotten threats before. This wasn't just about one angry contractor trying to shut someone up.
So this wasn't just some random thing. Mukesh built his career on shining a light into all these dark corners of Bastar. It makes you wonder if those in power had just decided they'd had enough.
That's a chilling thought, right? And it kind of sends a message to other journalists, too, like be careful what you dig into or you might be next. And this isn't just a problem in Bastar. This is a global issue. If journalists can't report freely without being afraid, then corruption and injustice, they can just run wild.
It feels like his death is a blow to everyone who believes in a free press, to anyone who wants to see people in power held accountable.
Yeah,
It's hard to process.
it really is. But we can't let this just become another sad story that people forget about. There has to be a real investigation, a thorough and impartial one, and the authorities need to be held responsible for making sure justice is served.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But even if they catch whoever is directly responsible, it doesn't fix the big problem.
Yeah.
How do we make it safer for journalists to do their job, especially in places like Bastar?
It's a question that a lot of people are wrestling with right now, and there are no easy answers. You need stronger legal protections for journalists. They need better training and resources so they can navigate these dangerous situations. And you need a culture where threats and violence against the press are just not tolerated.
That sounds like a tall order. But I keep thinking about what one of Mukesh's colleagues said. They said he paid the ultimate price for exposing the truth. We can't let his sacrifice be for nothing.
You're absolutely right. We need to do more than just be sad about his death. We need to take action. And it starts with us, the people who depend on journalists to tell us the truth.
So what can we do? What kind of actions can we take that would honor his legacy and protect other journalists?
Well, a few things come to mind. First of all, keep talking about this case. Share Mukesh's story. Talk about it with your friends and family. Use social media to keep the pressure on the authorities to do a proper investigation.
Don't let his name be forgotten.
Exactly. And beyond that, support organizations that are working to protect press freedom, both in India and around the world. These groups are doing really important work, protecting journalists and holding those in power accountable.
So this is about raising awareness, supporting those organizations, and holding people in power accountable.
Yeah, because ultimately the fight for press freedom is a fight for a more just and equitable society. It's a fight that Mukesh Chandrakar dedicated his life to.
And it's a fight we need to carry on in his memory. We'll talk about some more specific actions you can take in the final part of our deep dive. It's easy to get lost, in all the details of this case, the political intrigue, the fight for justice. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I just keep coming back to the human cost of it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We have to remember that behind every headline, behind every investigation, there are real people. People whose lives are just, shattered. Mukesh wasn't just some symbol, of press freedom or something. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a colleague.
Right. And the sources, they paint this picture of someone who is so passionate about his work, about making sure that the voices of people who might not otherwise be heard were amplified. But he was also, known for his kindness, for his willingness to help other people, even people who might have been on the opposite side of, whatever issue he was covering.
Yeah, he seemed like the kind of person who could really navigate a conflict zone. And not just by reporting on it, but by actively engaging with everyone involved. Remember how he helped to secure the release of those CRPF personnel, the ones who were captured by the Maoists? I mean, that says a lot about him.
Yeah, it really does make you wonder about the ripple effects.
Yeah.
The pain that his family and friends must be going through, the fear that other journalists in the region are probably feeling right now.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy that just extends so far beyond Mukesh himself.
That's true. And it leads us to a really important question. What can we do, as individuals, to honor his memory? Yeah. And to keep fighting the fight that he was so brave to carry on. Well, I think awareness is key. We can't let his name be forgotten. Sharing his story, talking about it, using social media to kind of keep up the pressure for a real investigation, those are all small steps, but they're important.
So don't let his name fade away.
Exactly. And beyond that, we can support those organizations that are out there fighting for press freedom in India and all over the world. These groups are doing such important work, protecting journalists, making sure that people in power are held accountable for their actions.
Right. So we talked about supporting those organizations. That's really important. But are there any specific actions our listeners can take, tangible things that can actually make a difference?
Yeah, I think so. One thing you could do is donate to or volunteer for an organization like the Committee to Protect Journalists or Reporters Without Borders. Those are two good ones. These groups provide all kinds of support, legal support, safety training, and they advocate for journalists who are facing threats.
So it's not just about being aware, it's about actively supporting the people who are on the ground actually doing the work.
Exactly. And another thing you can do is hold your own elected officials accountable. Contact your representatives, let them know you're concerned about press freedom violations, ask them to support legislation that protects journalists, both here and abroad.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just some far-off problem. It's something that affects all of us. Because a free press is essential for any democracy to function properly, right?
Absolutely. It really is the cornerstone. When journalists are silenced, when the truth is suppressed, it impacts everyone. Corruption can take over, injustice goes unchecked. And the people in power, they can basically do whatever they want.
Mukesh Chandrakar's story is such a powerful reminder of what's at stake here. He paid the ultimate price for exposing the truth. But his legacy can live on in the actions that we take.
I agree. We can't let his sacrifice be in vain. We have to continue the fight for truth, for justice, and for a world where journalists can do what they do without being afraid.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's a heartbreaking story, but it's so important. We need to keep Mukesh's memory alive, we need to take action, and we need to never stop fighting for a world where truth wins out.